All right, here we go. Magic Treehouse, book number 18, Buffalo Before Breakfast. We are on chapter 3 called Black Hawk. Jack stared at a circle of teepees ahead. Busy people in buckskins moved about the circle. Horses and ponies grazed nearby. Jack took out the research book and found a picture of the teepees. He read, "In the early 1800s, many different Native American tribes lived on the Great Plains. The Lakota were the largest tribe. They lived mostly in the areas we now call North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota." Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote, "Early 1800s, Lakota were largest tribe of Great Plains." Behind Jack and Annie, a horse neighed. They turned. A horse and rider were heading toward the teepee camp. The sun was very bright behind the rider. Jack could only see the outline of a body with a bow and a quiver of arrows on his back. Jack quickly flipped through the book. He found a picture of a man on horseback carrying a bow and arrows. Below the picture it said, "Lakota Warrior." Jack read, "Everything changed for the Native Americans of the Great Plains after white settlers arrived in the mid-1800s. Fighting broke out between Lakota warriors and white soldiers. By the end of the 1800s, the Lakota were defeated. They lost both their land and their old way of life." Jack looked back at the rider. The warrior was coming closer. "Get down," he whispered. "Why?" said Annie. "This might be a time when the Indians are fighting with the settlers," said Jack. The grass rustled as the warrior passed by them. His horse neighed again. "Arf! Arf!" "Shh," whispered Jack. But it was too late. The warrior had heard Teddy's barking. He galloped toward them, grabbing his bow. "Wait!" shouted Jack. He jumped up from the grass. "We come in peace." The rider halted. Now Jack saw that he was only a boy on the pony. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old. "Hey, you're just a kid," Annie said, smiling. But the boy didn't smile back. He did lower his bow while he stared at Annie. "What's your name?" she asked. "Black Hawk," he said. "Cool name," said Annie. "We're Jack and Annie. We're just visiting. We live in Frog Creek, Pennsylvania." Black Hawk nodded. Then he turned his pony around and started toward the Lakota camp. "Hey, can we come with you?" called Annie. Black Hawk looked back. "Yes," he said. "Meet my people." "You mean your parents?" asked Annie. "No, they died long ago," said Black Hawk. "I live with my grandmother." "Oh, I'd like to meet your grandmother," said Annie. "I'm going to see my grandmother today, too." Black Hawk nudged his pony forward again. Annie followed with Teddy. Jack didn't move. What if the Lakota are at war with the white settlers, he worried. What if they think we're enemies? "Annie!" Jack called softly. "We don't know if it's safe." But Annie just waved for him to come on. Jack sighed. He opened the research book and quickly flipped through the pages. He wanted information about how to act with the Lakota. On one page he read, "Good manners to the Lakota means speaking as few words as possible and sharing gifts when visiting." On another page he read, "The Lakota admire those who do not show fear." Jack's favorite piece of information was, "Holding up 2 fingers means friend." Jack put the book away. He ran to catch up with Annie. Annie was telling Black Hawk all about their grandmother. The boy listened silently. "Annie," Jack whispered, "I just read that it's good manners to be quiet, and we should give gifts and not show fear. Also, holding up 2 fingers means friend." Annie nodded. "Got that?" said Jack. "Sure," she said. "No talking, no fear, no problem." Jack looked up. He caught his breath. Ahead of them, the people at the campsite had stopped what they were doing. All eyes were looking at Jack and Annie. Jack quickly held up 2 fingers. Annie did the same. Chapter 4, Good Manners. Black Hawk led Jack and Annie toward the teepees. Everyone kept watching them. Jack couldn't tell what anyone was thinking. No one looked angry, but no one looked happy either. Jack wondered how to appear brave. He looked at Annie. She walked tall and straight. Her chin was up. Her face was calm. Jack straightened his shoulders. He lifted his chin, and he felt a little braver. Black Hawk stopped and slid off his pony. The pony headed for the grazing pasture. Then Black Hawk led them to a teepee. It was covered with buffalo designs. "Grandmother is inside," Black Hawk said to Jack and Annie. Inside the teepee looked like a small, round room. A fire burned in the center. Smoke rose through a hole at the top. An old woman sat on animal skins. She was sewing beads onto a moccasin. She looked up at Jack and Annie. "Grandmother," said Black Hawk, "this is Jack and Annie from Frog Creek, Pennsylvania." Jack and Annie both held up 2 fingers for friend. Grandmother raised 2 fingers also. Then Jack took off his coonskin cap. He gave it to Grandmother. She put the cap on her head and laughed. Jack and Annie laughed too. Grandmother's laughter and kind face reminded Jack of his own grandmother. "You wish to learn our ways," she said. Jack and Annie nodded. Jack could tell she was wise. Grandmother stood and left the teepee. They followed her. Outside, everyone was busy again. They all seemed to know that Jack and Annie weren't enemies. Jack looked around the camp. Men and boys carved bows. Women and girls pounded meat and sewed clothes. One girl was adding claws to a buckskin shirt. "The bear claws will give her the strength of the bear," said Grandmother. "She will sew on hawk feathers, elk teeth, and porcupine quills too. All will give her the power of the animals." Jack pulled out his notebook and wrote, "Sew bear claws to shirt." "I have strong animal power when I go on a buffalo hunt," Black Hawk said proudly. "What do you mean?" asked Jack. "I will show you," said Black Hawk. "Wait." Black Hawk went inside the teepee. Annie turned to Grandmother. "Why does he hunt the buffalo?" she asked. "The buffalo gives our people many gifts," said the old woman. "From his body, food from his body, teepees from his skin, and tools from his bones." Jack started making a list. "Cups from his horns," Grandmother went on. "Rope from his hair, even winter sleds from his ribs." Jack finished his list. Buffalo, skin for teepee, bones for tools, horns for cups, hair for ropes, ribs for sleds. "That reminds me of the seal hunter in the Arctic," said Annie. "He used all the gifts from the seal's body. He didn't waste a thing." Just then, Teddy began growling and barking. Jack and Annie turned around. They both gasped. Coming out of Grandmother's teepee was a huge wolf. And that's the end of chapter 4. Tomorrow we'll read chapter 5 called Sunlight and Midnight. Have a great afternoon, guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.